Welcome back to Project 613. Today we learn a special mitzvah that pertains to a Jewish king. It is a mitzvah for a Jewish king to write for himself his own personal Sefer Torah. We know this from the verse that says, Vayach keshivto al kisei mamlachto, at the time that the king ascends the throne, v'katav lo et mishnei Torah azot, he should write for himself a Torah scroll. Now, we learned yesterday that every Jewish man has an obligation to write for himself a Torah scroll. So what's the difference between every individual and the king? The answer is that the king has to write a second scroll, an additional one. And that means that even if a king previously owned his own Torah scroll even before he became king, he now has to write a second special Torah scroll. And this Torah scroll of the king would be kept with him constantly. He always had it with him. When a king would eat, he would have his Torah scroll with him. When he would go out to war, he would have it with him. If he would engage in judgment, he would have his Torah scroll with him. And it's for this reason that the king's Torah was written in very small size, very compact, so it should be convenient for the king to always keep with him at all times. The only exception is if the king is in a place where it's forbidden to take a Torah scroll for, let's say, if he goes to relieve himself, then he would not have the Torah scroll with him. But other than that, the king always has his own personal Torah scroll with him constantly at all times. What's the reason for this? One of the reasons is that in Judaism, the job of a king is always to remember that in fact he is not the real king. The real king is the king of all kings, Hashem. And the job of a king is actually to inspire all of the people to serve the real king, to serve Hashem. And therefore, he has to always be an example, a role model of what it means to be a true servant of Hashem. And it's for that reason that the king specifically has to be all the more devoted to the laws of the Torah and all the more devoted to the Mitzvot of the Torah and to Torah study. And that's why the king always keeps the Torah with him, as it will always remind him of his special role and his special obligation. Now, talking of Torah scrolls and writing Sifrei Torah, of course, to write a Torah scroll requires many, many months and much expertise from a specially trained scribe. And there are many, many detailed laws of what makes a Torah scroll kosher or not kosher. For example, even if there are two letters in the entire Torah scroll that are touching each other, that would invalidate the scroll. Or if the ink is not black, then the Torah scroll would be invalid. So a Torah scroll has to be written with much care and much attention in order for it to be a kosher Torah scroll. A Torah scroll, of course, is also the most sacred article, the most sacred object that the Jewish people have. We rise in the presence of a Torah scroll. We would fast if we would witness a Torah scroll falling to the floor. Thank you very much for watching. Have a wonderful day.